This is a season for family gatherings, gift giving, memories both happy and sad, and stresses both financial and emotional. Today, let's take a look at how, as Christians, we can successfully navigate the holidays. Now, I suspect that if I did a show of hands, and I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but if I did a show of hands and I talked about whether the holidays were a season that was somewhat difficult for you emotionally, I bet most people would raise their hands. It's the happiest time of the year, but it creates a lot of sadness. Why? Right? I mean, we sing joy to the world, and yet we're stressed about it. We sing Emmanuel, but we feel all alone. Welcome to the holidays, right? So, last week we looked at Colossians 18 through 25, and I'm going to remind you of that by reading it. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting to those who belong to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and never treat them harshly. Children, always obey your parents, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not aggravate your children, or they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything you do. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. Serve them sincerely because of your reverent fear of the Lord. Work willingly at whatever you do as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master you are serving is Christ. But if you do what is wrong, you'll be paid back for the wrong you have done, for God has no favorites. That's what we read last week. And again, this is read from the New Living Translation. And so I just want to go through basically how we live our lives, dealing with our families, and dealing with the stressful times of the season, because I think it's a stumbling block for so many people this time of year. People really struggle. So let's start with marriages. It says, wives, submit. And man, could we just create a whole discussion group over those two words. Wives, submit, right? But what are they being asked to submit to? They're being asked to submit to a loving husband. One that loves as Christ loved the church. That's what they're being asked to submit to. They're being asked to submit to one who is a leader towards Christ. One who is an example of Christ, a priest in their home, one that loves them unconditionally, one that cares for their future, one that cares for their needs, one that would place them above themselves because they love them like Christ loved the church. That's what they're being asked to submit to. If your wife struggles with the idea of submission, are you being that kind of a husband? Ouch. And it says husbands love. Love gives. My dinner done yet? How come the laundry wasn't ready?
Get in there and wash it.
Could you get the house cleaned up for me, please? Husbands love. We have a standard. As Christ loved the church, we're supposed to love. And I want to look at Mark 10, 1 through 12 for a minute here. It says, this is a discussion about divorce and marriages. It says, Then Jesus left Capernaum and went down to the region of Judea and to the area east of the Jordan River. Once again, crowds gathered around him, and as usual, he was teaching them. Some Pharisees came and tried to trap him with this question: should a man be allowed to divorce his wife? Jesus answered them with a question: what did Moses say in the law about divorce? Well, he permitted it, they replied. He said a man can give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away. But Jesus responded, he wrote this commandment that only as a concession to your hard hearts. But God made them male and female from the beginning of creation. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Later, when he was alone with the disciples in the house, they brought up the subject again, and he told them, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery against her, and if a woman divorces her husband and marries someone else, she commits adultery. Well, you say, well, that doesn't seem very forgiving. It seems like a high standard. I'll tell you that anytime I counsel marriage counseling with couples, I start right there. Is divorce okay? Well, it wasn't that way in the beginning. And the provision for divorce was added. Why? Because of the hardness of your hearts. The hardness of your hearts. Think about that. You know, years ago we did a study on the heart. We talked about hardness of your heart, that God can harden your heart, or you can harden your heart. Hard-heartedness is the opposite of love and forgiveness. Why was divorce created in what Moses gave? Because of the lack of love and forgiveness. So we put the provision in there. Now, this is the core piece to every relationship that we have in life. The marriage relationship is used to describe Christ's relationship to the church. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for his return. It is a foundational piece of understanding a proper relationship with God and with people. It goes on and talks about children in verses Mark 10, 13 through 16. And it says later, 13 through 16. One day some parents brought their children to Jesus so he could touch and bless them, but the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him. When Jesus saw what was happening, he was angry with his disciples, and he said to them, let the children come to me, don't stop them, for the kingdom of God belongs to those who are like these children. I tell you the truth, anyone who doesn't receive the kingdom of God like a child will never enter it. Then he took the children in his arms and placed his hands on their heads, and he blessed them. Fathers, this is your example of how you're supposed to deal with this stuff. You're not supposed to stop your child from coming to Christ or coming to God, having a relationship with God. You know, the Bible says, raise up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he won't depart from it. Well, here's the thing. We're supposed to keep them pointed towards God. And too many times, and this is why you have the stigma of preachers' kids, too many times we do that by laying down the law. And yet, Christ came to fulfill the law because we weren't too good at it on our own. And yet we somehow expect our children to just snap up and do that. No, we're supposed to show them the way with love. We're supposed to show them the way with love. In other words, we should not become that stumbling block by just pounding them over the head with rules and expectations that are not fair. They're kids. Now, do we have a standard we try and hold them to? Sure. But is it based in love? And so I want to lay that out as the example of how we should affect all of our relationships. We should be coming through those relationships in a loving fashion. Why? Well, aren't we supposed to be like Christ? I mean, that's what we're called to do, is live a life that's Christ-like. To be Christian is to be like Christ. That's the goal that we're supposed to have. We're supposed to let the love of God be our compass. Now, I'm not trying to, go to this idea that, everything is okay because it's all just about love, right? I mean, you can overcompensate in how you look at anything. But I want to get to this point because I think it has a lot to do with the struggles that we have around the holidays, the struggles that we have in relationships, and quite honestly, just the struggles that we have. See, where we get crossed up is how we think. The Bible tells us that we're supposed to think on things that are good, of a good report, things that are true, loving and kind. And the first place we screw up is that we start thinking on fantasy. Now you may say, oh yeah, that's it, video games, that's the problem. It's television's fault. That's what it is, it's television. Those movies, it's the Hallmark Channel. That screws us all up. You're supposed to have a little tiff and then get back together at the end, right? It's not what I'm talking about. Here's where we get crossed up. Life doesn't line up with your expectations. I should have been successful in this venture. I should have had a better upbringing. I should have had a more loving spouse. I should have had more money from my job. I should have had, you didn't. And for you to sit and compare what you have in life today to what you think it should have been is fantasy. You're living in a fantasy, and it turns into a nightmare because it doesn't line up with what you want it to be. I wanted my relationship with my dad to be different, but it wasn't. Maybe he was not a good father. You have a good father, a heavenly father. I'm sorry if your dad wasn't a good dad. I don't know what his reasons were or weren't, but if you keep comparing your life to what you think it should have been, you're constantly dwelling in fantasy. You're not dealing in truth. And you're not thinking on what is good or true. Look at where you're at and say, I thank God because of what he's done for me. I'm grateful to God because of what he's done for me. And when I start to dwell on what God has done for me and I start to function out of that reality, I can be free from the nonsense of what I think it should have been. It should have been different, but it wasn't. Stop dwelling there. I can't forgive my spouse because they're not measuring up to what I think they should be. Get over yourself. They're doing what they're doing. It's the best they can do at the moment. Lift them up in prayer. Forgive them. Love them. Work with what you have. Thank God for what I thank God because my husband brings home a paycheck every week. Thank God because my wife does put dinner on the table most of the time. Right? Sometimes you got to press the pizza button. That's right, on the microwave. You go to a family gathering around the holidays and it just doesn't work out the way you expected. So you get frustrated and upset. Your mashed potato casserole didn't turn out. Or somebody said something bad about your fuzzy Jell-O dish or whatever, you know? The nerve of them. I would have expected them to be nicer. Well, they weren't. Get over it. Thank God that you have the opportunity to be together. Well, you know, they kind of irritate you, but you know what? They're family. Thank God that you have them. Someday you won't. Then you can look back with regret at all the things you missed. Or you could start thinking on what's true and of a good report and being thankful for what's there. And you could enjoy the time you have with your family even though they're not perfect, just like you. Sorry, I mean to burst your bubbles there. That's the first sign that you're not perfect is when you think you are. Okay? It's the same with your friends. You start putting expectations on your friends that's not fair. My wife and I went through a phase where we talked about this a lot, but we talked about the fact that one of the first things that causes you to get upset is when your goals are blocked. And that became one of our questions when we disagree. I'd be all worked up about something. She'd look at me and say, "Are your goals being blocked?" Yes. Now I have to fix my attitude. Right? Why am I upset about this? It's not meeting my expectation. Why am I holding it to an expectation? That's fantasy. Can you have goals? Yes. Can you strive to reach for those things? Yes. Can you superimpose those on somebody else? No. Why? It doesn't work. You ever tried to push a cat somewhere? It's the same effectiveness, right? You push them, they don't go the way you want. All of a sudden, you're all cut up and scratched because they got tired of being pushed. You barely heard the hiss, right? That's how it is. You can't push people to do something, but you can love them. You can love them right where they're at. You say, well, that's so hard for me. Yeah, but that's the standard you're being held to. I'm supposed to love like Christ loved. Why? Because I'm a Christian. We've been talking for weeks and weeks about this series Revealed, which was designed to be kind of a two-part or two-phased approach to a new believers class or a reminder of what it is to be a believers class, and we've covered a lot of stuff. And every time we've done a lesson, I've ended it with there's a better way to see. I don't know if you noticed that or not, or if you even care, but I have. There's a better way to see. See what? See Christ. And we're supposed to be a reflection of Christ. That's the standard we're supposed to be trying to achieve, is that we're trying to be like Christ. Now, we're not trying to be like the Ten Commandments. We're not trying to be like a set of rules. We're trying to be like Christ. What does that mean? I could never be like Christ. I am not capable of that standard. But if I go back to He is my Savior, my Lord, my source, my life, my hope, my peace, my strength, my joy. If I go back to putting Him in His rightful place and reminding myself of that, then you could take that phrase that ran around for so long, what would Jesus do? And you could drag that out and hold that up as a reminder to yourself. What would Jesus do? Well, what should I do? See, I need to remember that I'm forgiven. so that I can forgive. Because he first forgave, I can forgive. Because he first loved, I can love. And here's the thing about forgiveness. Forgiveness goes with freedom. I can forgive, and it sets me free. I am forgiven, and it sets me free. And here's the hardest problem we have in dealing with forgiving others. I don't want to forgive you because it lets you off the hook. I'm setting you free. And I'm not ready to do that just yet. You need to twist and suffer a little bit so you won't do that again.
You're not hurting the other person. You only hurt yourself.
Yeah, that's all you do. You hurt yourself. I'm not going to forgive you. That's just drinking poison. That's not a biblical saying. It's a Buddha or something said that. Drinking, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. But the reality is, when I don't forgive, I keep myself chained to something. And I can't get past it. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people that were depressed. I've talked to couples that were going through relationship problems. And over and over and over and over and over again, the theme is simply this: I can't forgive. I can't let go. I can't forget. I can't stop punishing them. And it's the same thing when you're haunted by your past. I'm not trying to downplay the effects of your past. I'm trying to tell you that until you stop giving it life, you're going to be stuck with the consequences of living in fantasy land of, I could have been a contender. It could have been different. It's not. Stop holding that standard up of something that never happened. It didn't happen. It's not going to happen. God has a plan, and it's wonderful. And as soon as I can start recognizing that and embracing that, I can get free. And when I'm free, I can be loving. I can be supporting. Wouldn't that be novel? I can be forgiving. I can be trusting in God. See, when I start thanking God for what He's done, when I start thanking God for what He's provided, it creates an expectation for what God is going to do. And God is the one I can expect things from, as long as it's in line with His Word. Right? We sometimes put expectations on God that aren't realistic. God, I'm going to go down, I'm going to spend my last $10 on lottery tickets. Make me a winner.
I'll tithe.
I'll tithe on it, I promise, God. You'll be rich. And you go scratch them off, and all you've got is paper. And a little pile of silver stuff. Oh, God, you let me down. I don't know. Did you see that in the Word somewhere? I've never seen in the Word where it says buy scratcher tickets and you'll solve all your financial problems. If anything, you should go fishing. And that's only for taxes. So when we start trusting God, because He said He'll supply all your needs. He didn't say He'd supply all your wants. He said He'd supply all your needs. Later, when He talks about wants, He also talks about changing what you want to matching with what He wants. You know, we think we have a better plan, but we don't. We have unreasonable expectation, and we have grandiose plans that make me the center of my universe instead of God. See, when it's all said and done, I want to be able to say that I was a Christian, and I want people to say that I had a life that was well lived. I don't need a reputation. I need to have a legacy or a testimony of a life well lived. Not where I'm the star of the movie, but where I was humble enough to admit when I was wrong, when I was able to be broken and contrite before God, when I could cry with you and pray with you and show you love when you didn't deserve it or when I didn't deserve it. That's what we're supposed to be as Christians. We're supposed to be a living testimony to the goodness of God. We're supposed to share the good news, not the bad attitude. It's just the way I am. Well, that's the way you were. The Bible says you're a new creation. But what are you thinking on? Are you thinking on those things of God? Or are you thinking on what you want it to be, or wish it could be, or hoped it could be, or expected it to be? When you go to those holiday gatherings with your family this year, can you go there without expectation and instead go there with thankfulness and joy and appreciation for the people you're with, even with their flaws? Oh, there goes my sister again. She gets lost in that same trap emotionally every year, but I'm just going to pray for her this time. Hey, sis, is there anything you need? Can I help you in any way? You know, I really appreciate you. I love you. You're my sister. Right? Can you do that? Well, that might be hard. Well, it's not if you give it to God. And it might be right. And it might get you closer to God. And it might help you understand how great a love he had for you to forgive you before you'd even done all the garbage you did. Before you'd even done all the things that made you completely unlovable. Right? Can we approach things this year differently? Can we be different here at the end of 2023 than we've been in previous years? Can we make being a testimony of the goodness of God a higher priority? Can we make it our testimony that we are Christ-like? Strive to be loving and forgiving in all of our relationships? Even when somebody's just not lovable? They can just be cantankerous and hard to get along with, whatever. And just, I love you. And just leave it at that. Shut up. Right? I read my wife a meme, and there's several variations of it running around, but it said my brain said, forgive them and let it go. And my mouth said, well, here's another thing. Right? Get control of that tongue. Right? Give a good report. Not, the land is inhabited by giants, but it's a beautiful land and we can take it. Right? Those family, when it starts to get a little prickly, instead of saying, well, you know what, I got a thing or two to say about that. You can say, you know what, I am so thankful that we're all here together. I really love you guys. Bridle your tongue. Let Jesus shine through you and be a light in the world. So in the holidays, see if you can remember what Jesus did. And you can walk through in your holy days, shining the light of God instead of fueling the fire of controversy. And instead of being depressed by the holidays, be thankful for this time that we have, that we can focus on loving and giving and spending time with those that are important to us. And that's it for this week.